Hello, I'm Fran Pearson, and my connection to Cardigan Street is that in the 1930s, my grandfather was Methodist minister there when it was a Methodist chapel. My granddad wasn't from Luton originally. In fact, it's hard to imagine anywhere quite so different to Luton. He was born up on a farm in the Yorkshire Dales and decided he wanted to train to be a Methodist minister. So in the 1920s and 30s, that meant once you got your first posting, you had to move every year. So every year, my granddad had to put up his family, which was consisted of my dad and my dad's older brother Freddie and my grandma, and they had to move somewhere else in the north of England usually. My granddad's first job, however, was one that affected him for the rest of his life. So he was sent to be what was called a padre, which is the kind of army chaplain to the trenches in the First World War. And he was said to be a really difficult man. And without ever having known him, because he died long before I was born, I always like to think that the reason he was difficult was not because he was a bad or difficult person, but that because he was affected by all the terrible things he'd seen in his first job as a minister. Going to chapel was the main thing I remember from my childhood. I did a lot of it, and our whole life revolved around it. I never understood till I got older that not everyone did that. So it also made me feel quite different when I was growing up in Luton. But I used to go mainly to St Margaret's Methodist Church at Biscuit Mill, which is a big red, huge red building right on the top of the hill. And one half of the building was the church, which oddly had tip-up seats like the cinemas of my childhood, and the other half was lots of big rooms where different parts of what was called Sunday school used to meet. So as you got older, you moved from room to room. I found it quite hard going to Sunday school in the sense it wasn't very fun. In fact, it was no fun. And I felt though that I had to keep going because it was just a part of family life and there was no choice in the matter. And I remember coming home when I was about 10 one day and saying to my mum at Sunday lunch, "Oh, I feel so bad." And I said the name of our Sunday school teacher and I said, "His prayers are so long, Mum. I had my eyes open. Do you think that was a really terrible thing? I just got so bored and he prays for so long." A Methodist service would tend to be about an hour or an hour and 10 minutes long. And the Methodists have always kind of prided themselves on their hymn singing, which is a bit different. And they always think other religions aren't as good at singing as they are. So a Methodist service would have about 5 hymns in it, and everyone would sing together. Children would go in for the first hymn, then there'd be a prayer and probably another hymn, and then generally children would go out to Sunday school at that point. But the service would carry on for the adults, and sometimes the children would stay in, at which point there'd be a Bible reading from the Old Testament, followed by a Bible reading from the New Testament. Then there'd be a sermon, and Methodists are quite big into their sermons. So this could be up to 30 minutes, probably more like 20, but not a quick thing. And then after the sermon, there's generally a short kind of thoughtful hymn. And then there's a big build up to the collection because giving money to the church to keep it going is also a really important part, I think, of any religion. So there'd be lots and lots of prayers at that point. If you were a child, this was when you just really had enough. There'd be lots of prayers with kind of responses. So you'd need to say something like, "Thanks be to God" at the right point, or something like that. And then that would finish, and then some very soft organ music would start playing. and the collection would be taken. And I always used to be terrified of dropping this plate full of money as it was passed over me. And once a month, it's not such a big thing in the Methodist Church as in other Christian religions. There'd be something called Holy Communion. So it's, I think, known as Eucharist or Mass in some other Christian churches. And this would be kind of at the end of the morning service, but there'd also be one at 8 o'clock in the morning, which was just a communion service on, let's say, the third Sunday of the month. Or children don't do it usually in the Methodist Church, or they didn't then. So I was kind of unaware of this. And quite unusually, the Methodist Church, you have a piece of bread and some wine. In other churches, it's actual alcoholic wine. In the Methodist Church, because they don't drink, they're what's called teetotal, they don't drink alcohol. It has to be special non-alcoholic wine. And at the end of the service, the minister or the preacher goes and waits by the back door, and the big wooden doors at the back of St Margaret's Church would be thrown open, and then everybody gets in a queue and walks out and shakes hands with the minister and says what a wonderful sermon that was, even if they were asleep. So that was very much what the structure of a Methodist service was like.